Hi, I'm Kathy Flaminio, and I'm the owner of 1,000 Petals. And it's a training and consulting company in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And we really work with teachers, educators, therapists on how to integrate mindfulness movement and social emotional learning. And we have developed a product line and programs called Move Mindfully, which I'll talk about more, but it's really kind of a distillment of my experience in the Minneapolis public schools as a social worker for 20 years. And I live in St. Paul, Minnesota. My family and I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old and an amazing husband and dog, and that's a little bit about me.
Hello, I'm Mary McCarter. I am a certified school nurse. I worked in High School District 214, or I recently retired from there. I had also worked in the local elementary schools and also the special ed co-op, so full spectrum of ages and types of students that I worked with during my career. And living in Arlington Heights almost my whole life. I have twins that will be 27 next week, and a husband and a dog that I love. She's my baby.
And our chapter, so my chapter in this amazing book, which I just feel so grateful to be here, really.
Yes.
It's so wonderful when you think you're kind of the trailblazer out there, and then to be at a conference like this, to be involved with so many people that are passionate about this work and that there's really good work happening. So the fact that this book was written and we got to be, I feel so grateful to be a part of this. My section is called Drop Everything and Move.
Mm-hmm. And I also, like this book, there's such a breadth of knowledge and wisdom in here. I also was very honored to be asked to write a chapter for it, and mine was about caring for the whole student in the school nurse office, but I really found that for me, I was caring for the staff as well as the students, so it could really be expanded on with that.
And I might start with Mary, because we do a lot of training. So Move Mindfully is a program that really works on the whole system, that really goes in and works with the whole school or the whole county or the whole, hospital setting. And one of the things we did in St. Paul was to work with all the nurses. So I want to hear about kind of the trailblazing work that you did and your journey of really having the nurse's office be the place of mindfulness.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it started out with my own personal journey that, my childhood was a little difficult in navigating, my own way. Nursing is a second profession for me. I was a social worker first and found that wasn't quite the right thing for me. Worked in business, went back and got my nursing degree. So I came into it a little older, maybe a bit wiser, I don't know. But when I had my kids, I found out what school nursing was, and that the school nurse is the only medical professional in a building, and anything that anybody doesn't know what to do with somehow winds up at the nurse's
You were
door.
my best friend as the social worker. So I was glad to hear that you were a social worker and a nurse, because that skill is so, both of those together.
And I think those listening skills helped me to be good at what I did. When I first started, I worked in a program for special needs students, so the medically fragile, cognitively impaired group, and that was when I realized that everybody's an individual, because as a nurse you go through and you learn how to do these things, but when you're taking care of a child with a syndrome you've never heard of before, then you need to delve deeper and figure out, okay, so what are the symptoms of this and how do I embrace that child as a whole? So that was my first experience as a school nurse, is navigating a child with extreme special needs and how do we make them successful at school. So from there I went to an elementary building where I still had a small handful of those special needs students, but then I was in a K through 6 building, and then 6 through 8, and those students started coming to me with the tummy aches and the headaches and the crying, and I wasn't quite understanding, because their vital signs would be normal, and then I delved deeper, something going on in class, what happened today? Excuse me. And that's when I found that a lot of the reasons that kids were coming to my office was more emotional. And when you could check in with the emotional and you could acknowledge that there's something going on, that would help them to be more successful in going back to class.
So your social worker and then the mindfulness. So what would that look like I have two questions. What would that look like in a nurse's office, kind of integrating some of those mindfulness? And secondly, like what, now that you're retired, what would you love other schools and nurses to know? Like how do they do this,
So tell me the first question again. I'm sorry.
Describe kind of how you integrated the mindfulness. What did that look like?
So with the younger kids, so I started out with the younger kids, and I was kind of trying to work my way through, like, how do I support these kids and keep them at school? And then when I moved into the high school, it really became apparent to me that I really needed to be addressing more of this emotional issue that they were coming to me with, because we were having chest pain and kids were thinking heart attacks and breathing, and their lungs would be clear and their vital signs would be normal. So, I'd always do the physical assessment to make sure that I wasn't missing something. But then you see a child that is in distress. So I started with something simple like just, ground your feet. Make sure, they're rooted into the ground. Sit up straight, roll your shoulders up, take a breath, and let the breath out. And if they worked with that, I would just go into a basic relaxation exercise, relax the muscles of your forehead, and I'd work my way down their body. And if I could tell that they were following, and like you can almost see the relaxation happen, you can see the shoulders drop, you can see the tension fall out of their face. So if they were really into it, I would, then, okay, breathe in through your toes, and whatever's worrying you, just send it out the bottom of your feet. Let it go for now. You don't need to deal with it right now. Just be here right now.
Nice.
And then if they were breathing, I'd let them take a few breaths, and then I'd pull them back up through the backside of their body. And only when you're ready, open your eyes. And I started to see that the kids would come back and go, hey, Nurse McCarter, can we do that thing that you did? And I realized that at some point they knew what to do. So when I was at the regular high school, there was a corner in back. I had, 5 or 6 cots. And in the farthest back one, I put a little lighted water fountain, and we started playing calming, the Calm app. We started playing that over the office speaker.
Nice.
So, we would have birds or whatever we wanted that day. And they would say, can I go sit in the corner? And they would really say, can I sit in the corner? And then they would sit in the corner and do what they needed to do, and they would go back to class. And now we have kids that would be going home sick. We've now taken that, even though it takes time. And this is where that nursing piece comes in. It took time to get to that point with those students. But I wasn't calling the social worker down, and I wasn't calling the counselor down. It was like, okay, we can do this, and we just need to do it a few times. And then they felt comfortable enough, most of them, not all of them. There were still issues that were not going to be solved by sitting and breathing or moving in a corner. But having that space available, many students would come in, use the space, and leave, and I didn't even see them after a while.
That's great.
So for nurses, honing in on that there is distress and that their physical signs are normal, delving a little bit deeper into the why, is something happening? Do you want to share something? Is there somebody you feel comfortable talking to? Because they don't always know the nurse, but getting them the help that they need can be very helpful. And I think just taking those steps and trying to do some grounding and breathing, and there's a lot of resources out there. And in the book, I have like a little speech or I can't think of the word
section.
For it. Like I have a little bit that they can read to the students.
You have a script.
A script, thank you. Word finding difficulties.
A script.
Yes, there's a script in the book that they can use for that. So that's kind of, I think, answers your questions. But
that's great.
You also were a social worker in the schools, and you've kind of taken this wonderful journey. So when I read your chapter, I was really interested about, how you discovered, I think your quote was, one of the students said to you, what is this?
Yeah.
Do you want to
I it's so interesting as you get older that you can kind of look back into your career and find those pivotal, shifts in your entire career. And so I was in the fitness and wellness industry, teaching aerobics since I got out of college, and yoga and mindfulness, and then I was a social worker and I loved it. My mom was a social worker, so I just always knew I wanted to be a social worker. And about 10 years into my career, I thought, oh my gosh, if I hear another story that a 5-year-old would come, and it sounded like an 80-year-old story. I mean, the experiences, and I was finding like I was really burning out. And literally, it was like a super active group. Many people have heard this story if they've read my website, but it really was a monumental moment where the kids were just wild and the teachers were like, this isn't working. I'm like, this is not working. And all of a sudden it was like, la, la, la. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're done talking. And I started, I had a cool administrator, and we brought in mats, and we started just, I didn't really know what I was doing. I taught yoga to adults, so I was like, I don't even know, I've never taught it to kids, but I just started to relax into it and thinking about the skills of breathing and movement. We started integrating those skills, and that was when literally in this session, after doing some movement, and this was brief, we're in a school setting, so it was like 20 minutes when they come to my office, and she just looked at me just shocked. And you could tell when you said in the nurse's office, you can see the relaxation responses set in. Never had she really experienced it. And so she's just like, what is this? I'm like, what is what? She's like, I'm so relaxed, but my life is a mess. And what I love about this work is I got to say to her in this moment, it's not messy inside. Way inside is not affected by this life, but we get affected by it, and you have a tool now, and you can use that. And so a few weeks later, then she comes back, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, what? And she's like, I do my breathing exercises in the bathroom. I'm like, oh my God, that's perfect.
Awesome.
That's probably the one quiet place in your house. So long story short is I was trying these things. We were seeing results in classrooms. Kids were taking them home and showing breath work. And I met an OT in our school district that was also doing the same work, and a social worker that we knew introduced us, and we wrote a sabbatical. And we just happened to be kind of at the right place in the right time. I mean, we basically said we want to study, research mindfulness, movement, and kind of mental health, and look at this. And then a woman named Karma, who was also a social worker in Minneapolis, said, hey, there's a couple in Portland, Oregon. They're the founders of Yoga Calm, Jim and Linnea, and you should call them because they've already written the curriculum. We thought we would be writing all this. Mm-hmm. So we flew them to Minneapolis, and they trained my group of teachers, and I basically was like, okay, this is it. I want to be one of your trainers. So I was like, how do we do that? And so together we kind of created that. And within those 12 years, we were doing the Yoga Calm training. We started the first few years, we trained about 1,000 educators. Amazing. And we got lucky because in our school district, they had this program where it was like action research. If the teachers took our course, they got paid to take our course, which was amazing when we think we don't have money and then we find money. Mm-hmm. They got paid to take our course, and then they got paid to do action research on the work. Wow. So we had nurses and speech clinicians. We had OTs. So we saw like decibels in classrooms going down. We saw behavior referrals going down from like 16 to 0. We saw, like during Drop Everything and Read on sustained attention. So we saw all this, great results. Mm-hmm. And then in my journey, then from there, we developed our program Move Mindfully, which is really after, having people in workshops, kind of following them to the school and training the entire school, and then training an entire school district. And now we're training entire counties that have like 17 school districts in the county. The Move Mindfully program started to be more of a systems program, like looking at organizational culture and systems and how you shift the whole system with mindfulness practices. So it started off with us doing trainings, but then we'd go in the school and we customize the training, which I think is so important because we have like 1,000 initiatives. And I didn't want to be the another initiative. So I would always go in and meet with the team, nurses, OT, really the whole team, and like, what are you doing? Oh, we're doing responsive classroom, conscious discipline. We're doing zones of regulation. Okay, this fits right in. This isn't a program. This is a system. And then we train in on our Move Mindfully and the Yoga Calm, how to integrate those techniques. And then we started doing the residencies. And the residencies, it's kind of like an art residency, but we do a mindfulness residency where we team with teachers for 5 weeks, and it really wasn't about us, because the yoga and mindfulness is not about the yoga or mindfulness. It's about the teacher getting present in the practices to be with the child and being seen and heard. So if a teacher we know is more regulated, which is really hard to do, a child will feel that connection, like Daniel Siegel says, feeling felt. And when a child feels felt, we know this in the nursing, that's where healing happens. That's where human connection happens and learning. So we would partner with the teachers so they'd feel confident that these can be simple, like start a morning meeting with, we teach Move Mindfully. It's like breathe, move, rest. So here's some breathing techniques, here's some movement, here's some rest. And then we talked about, as a social worker, I got fascinated on the emotional regulation. So, okay, I know all these movements the teachers are learning, like down dog, tree. The movements are important, but I need to know if I see a kid like freaking out, like what movements would be helpful. So we've designed like these card deck, the card deck we designed, like this one has like use when big emotions. Like this would be like down dog, we know is a great movement, right? And so first of all, these are kids, you know, real kids in real clothes, not on yoga mats, you know, but this is proprioceptive input. They're getting input into the ground. It's an inversion. So maybe this week we're going to be working on how to handle big emotions, and we're going to do like plank, down dog, child's. So then when the kids are having issues and they go to their safe place, or they go, we call them the B station, they'll know when they have big emotions. Or let's say they're tired. Everybody's like, you got to wake up. No, just meet tired. Here's tired. Let's just meet tired. And then we'll practice that routine, and then the kids have their routines. So that what we've done is kind of the science and practice is not just learning breathing and movement, but knowing, having teachers have a guide, and then there's visuals all over the building. That's like lovely. When I'm anxious, use when anxious. Like in the nurse's office, we would have the posters, and kids would find movements when they're anxious. And I always bust kids, because they would be like, I'm not doing this, and then we'd be in class, and then I'd see them in the hall, like, you know, doing an eagle, like, and like, you don't even do that in class. They're like, I know. So we just talked about this in sessions, like it's the ones that actually need it the most that might not look like they're doing it, and they're totally getting it. First of all, the room is getting regulated, and that's going to help that child feel safe. Secondly, the kid is getting, I mean, this is personal work. Like, I don't want to lead a kid to be doing all these movements when they are completely grief-stricken. You know, I don't want to be like, hi, no, I can't breathe that deep today. I can breathe this deep today. So that was a long answer, but that's kind of, I mean, I get so excited because we are seeing it. Like, I can go in a school and drop everything and move was a school in Burnsville. Sarah Singleton and Katie and John, the principal, they got funding. You know, they got funding, first of all, small funding, and then they got state health improvement grants and Title I grants, and we did an entire rollout, which I call like the Cadillac of services, because it's like you get some people trained in a longer training in the Yoga Calm, they get certified, and then we come in the Move Mindfully and we do training for all the staff. Then we do consultations, small groups where teachers can really say, I'm exhausted and I can't even handle this myself. So we give them practices in a small group. They don't have to do it in front of the whole team. And then we talk about, you know, what are the main great things that are happening in the room? What are your struggles? And here's how to integrate the mindfulness and movement. Let's design it. Okay, now let's go into your class. So we'd have the consultation, and then we'll go in the classroom and demo what we just talked about. And then they, like, schools are so creative. They decided it's March, you know, March is coming up. They're like March Madness, because they were feeling like some teachers got this, some didn't. So they started saying, for March, we're going to do March Madness, where they took our poster strips and the principal got over the announcement. They looked at behavior data. When are the high incidents? And they got over the speaker, and it was drop everything and move. You know, instead of drop everything and read, because we know trauma's in our nervous system, that if we're going to get reading, we got to move. But it's not just wild movement, it's yoga-based movement. It's integrative, it's slow and breath work.
It's the poses that hit the areas that are affected.
So then they got the whole school totally psyched, because even the teachers that weren't that excited, they got gift cards, like $5 gift cards. So the kids were like, you got to film us, you got to film us. And then the kids would they'd film and they'd post on their little,
Twitter or whatever.
Twitter. And so then the whole school started embracing. And the shift, just like in our research, like when the teachers felt the shift inside, they could, they wanted to do their own study, just like you, when you start to do your own study. Because there is one more thing, and I know I'm running out of time, but the one thing I think is really important is like, do we train all the teachers? Because can teachers train if they don't do their own practice? Or can we start with the kids? And I think it's both. Because I couldn't wait till all the teachers went through their own mindfulness program. And I think it's amazing. And I think teachers, obviously we know that teachers that are doing their own mindfulness and practices, it makes a huge difference, because I can teach from that place of knowing. But we kind of went the other way, where we're training the teachers with their own our training is all their own practices, because you experience it for yourself, and then we talk about how to bridge this. But when they started to use our visuals and our really simple things, the kids started to change. Their rooms started to get calmer, and they're like, I'm gonna do my own study. And now we see teachers going to do their own MBSR classes and their own yoga journey. So I do think it's both, and I do think that teachers can learn with the kids.
I agree. And I found we tried to roll it out. When I was moving into a building my first year there, they were trying to roll out a program, and it was led by one of the social workers, but there wasn't buy-in from the staff.
Yeah.
So I watched it flounder simply because there wasn't that buy-in.
Yeah.
And I quickly realized that there wasn't buy-in because the teachers weren't practicing, and it was a special ed program with very intense needs of the students. And the teachers were really like, we talked about the pail, and there's like one more drop goes in and you're just going to overflow.
Yeah.
I think that's how a lot of the teachers were feeling.
No matter how good the programs are,
Yes, and so that year wasn't so successful, but we did start doing some yoga in the PE classes, and teachers asked me to do it after school, and that led into the graduate program.
Can you talk about that?
Yes, we have a internal university program through Quincy University, and we write up our own syllabus and what our plan for the courses, and we have to submit it, and it needs to be approved both through the district administration and then through Quincy. And so, knowing about mindful schools, and there's a nurse who teaches mindfulness through an online platform, and kind of thinking about these. One of my staff yoga students said to me, "Mary, can't you do something?"
Yeah.
And I thought about it. I'm like, how we talked about that challenge, like, can you rise to the occasion of something? And so I was like, I think I could do that, So I went home and I, did all my research and came up with, so I think we need to have the science, you need to have the science for admin to be on board. But then, what does mindfulness look like? What is mindfulness? So my very first day in the class, my homework was going to be for them to sit for 10 minutes and, experience that, and they had to do it 6 days a week, because, you have so many minutes that you have to do for your class to be, meet the time requirement. And I quickly realized that none of my staff were going to be able to do that, and loved them all dearly, but they were just too full. And so we reeled it back in. We're like, okay, so what can be a mindful practice? What can you do what can you do that you find calming? And this person likes to walk in nature, this person likes to walk their dog. I had one gal who loved to sit in the steam room. I mean, there were just things that they knew that were very calming for them. And so I'm like, okay, so let's do this. Let's take our 10 minutes and you write down, you journal what you did. I mean, they were going to journal anyways, but just a short little journal blurb. What did you do and how did it feel? And do you want to try something different? And so my whole approach to the classroom was, what kind of things can we do as a group that they could then bring back to the students? So we did some reflexology with some acupressure. I had a Reiki teacher come in and talk about Reiki, not that we did that in the school, but just giving them different experiences. I had a woman with a therapy dog come in and talk about what it's like to be, the animal therapy person. We went to a labyrinth There's if you go into labyrinths.org, there are labyrinths in every state, which I had never really done a labyrinth until my yoga training. And a labyrinth it's not a maze. There's one way in and there's one way out. And there's a man out in Barrington, Relax for Life. It's like this lovely place to go. And he has 3 full-size labyrinths in his backyard. And he does trainings, full-day labyrinth trainings. But he allowed me to bring my students out in the middle, like in the fall. It was beautiful. You know, then we'd go in the spring with my next class. And they would just get to walk silently in a labyrinth, just to feel a labyrinth. And these are things, you know, so you have the finger labyrinths. There's all things that you can bring to the classroom.
And then
with
they
these
did
different
that. So these are the teachers in your school that you kind of led this graduate levels class, so they get graduate credit, so it's like a win-win for everybody.
Right. And so their final project was develop a tool that you can use for staff or you could use for your students in your classroom. And we made a toolbox. So whatever was made over the 3 years that I ran the program is in this toolbox that's available to everybody that wants it. You know, it's on the district server, and you can go in and like do staff, or you can do like mindful eating or mindful walking, or you know. One of the gals had some special needs kids, and they actually puffy painted a very easy labyrinth. But the kids got those OT skills that they're working on, the fine motor, and then they could literally do their own labyrinth with their fingers, because many of them aren't mobile, or walking a labyrinth would be difficult for them. So a lot of the activities that are in there can be geared from our young learners to our physically or cognitively impaired, to some of our real social emotional. So, but you know, I wanted to ask you, you had talked about Sky Oaks Elementary and how you got the whole school to buy in. And how did you get funding? Because I know several times over the last couple days of this conference that we're at right now, people have said, I can't get funding. So, like, I had no funding in my building. The teachers paid for the course. You know, and
so every state is different. We're really lucky in our state of Minnesota that they have the state health improvement plans, and part of the state health improvement plan is to create active classrooms, nutritional work on nutrition, and safe routes to school. So we happen, being the anthropologist and social worker I'm like, we're going to figure out how these systems of money and support kind of is a win-win for all. So we really tried to understand the grant, and we've slowly but surely got into counties. But there are you know, some of the national grants are looking at, you know, mindfulness and yoga-based movement. All these mindfulness practices really fall under this mental health. There's a lot of mental health money coming in. Suicide prevention, we come in. We got in through Title I. Alternatives to a suspension. We have private funders, just really letting people know what we're doing. And then we had other organizations like Peacemakers Minnesota. I mean, these are local, but it's an organization that matches funding. So not only were we getting funding, we were getting money to match it. But I think people need to start to broaden how we're connected. And the mental health and suicide right now is like huge. And there are grants, there are national grants. And movement grants. So I think looking there, we also on my website, which is 1000-petals.com, we had something we wrote up regarding grants. Like our blog is so interactive. We just hope that people can just get on it, and like there's a whole section on what to do when it's like snowing out and you can't go outside, or indoor recess, or we do stuff with parents. And that's another big component of our work that I didn't mention, is that we do the family nights, not only, and we do them virtual or we do them on site. And at Sky Oaks, there was a huge family night. We had like 280 parents. It was in 3 languages, English, Somali, and Spanish. And we're so lucky, because then our materials are in Spanish and in Somali, because that school needed it, and now we have lots of schools that have used that. But I do think, I think about our journeys, and it does start with us being passionate about our own health. Like my own mental health was in crisis, so I needed to look for something else. But then really starting, I think a lot of this is organic, and I think when you get really excited, you just want to be like changing everybody's mind, and that's not our job. Our job is to find those windows and those classrooms and those teachers that are ready and to walk through with us. And then what we kept finding is other teachers are like, what's happening here? What's going on here? Or this lecture I just listened to about
You feel
integrating
it when
in
you
PE.
walk in the classroom. It's
You can
not
feel it,
escalated,
and then
it's-
other teachers, and then they start to talk. And that's how we have gotten, we have hardly done any like promotion. I mean, it's basically, we started in a school, and then we started in a district, and then one school district talked to this school district. This director of special ed was like, have you started this? And then we worked with an entire county. And it really was because we also waited. I mean, one school was like 5 years, and we were just like, when they're ready. And when they were ready, we've done the whole school, and we got funding for the whole school.
And I think it's such a blessing to those schools when they do the whole school,
Yeah.
because I think you really need to have everybody's buy-in
Yeah.
for really to be successful.
Well, it's a cultural change. I love
Yes,
Brené
yes,
Brown's.
culture.
I love Brené Brown, but I love her definition of culture. It's like the way we do things around here. Like when you walk in, you feel it. There's an honoring. You know, that you're important, and that your nervous system is doing what it's supposed to do, and we don't have to be captive of that system. And then the whole place, like when I'm in this place of regulation and you are, we're connected. I think that's the essence of yoga,
That's
right?
beautiful. Yeah, I don't think we need
So
to
maybe
say
we'll end
anymore.
there.
I think that's beautiful.
All right, cheers.
Yeah. Awesome.